It's really nice to experiment with new hymns when we have the choir here. So I am excited about today. I think it's going to be fun, this sermon. But I also have had a hard time figuring out how to organize this sermon because there's so much I want to talk about and share and so little time, and I'm not a scientist and I'm not really a detail person. I'm more of a big picture person, like the big picture and the details kind of go past me a little bit. So I tend to quickly move to a place of trust and then let others focus on the details. And so I'm going to share with you my passion about how spirituality and science are beginning to intersect, but I'm not going to be the person that can then go and do the research and explain it to you from a scientific way. And that's the invitation to all of you who, if you've been inspired by some of what I've said today and you're a historian and you want to learn more, or you're a scientist and you want to learn more, or you're an astronomer and you want to learn more, or you're a musician and you want to learn more about sound and how it all relates together, that is the invitation for today, to think about what and how this matters to you. Because like I said, I think that we are in a really interesting phase of human history. I think this is a really, really interesting time to be alive. It can kind of be a scary time. There's a lot going on, but I'm optimistic because I also think that there are so many opportunities with where we are and where we're going if we're really willing to open up to the concept, the idea that we're so much more than what we realize right now. And I think it's time for a new paradigm. It's time for a completely new way to understand how the world works and who and what we are as human beings in relation to that. Because we're not going to survive if we just simply continue this cycle of war and peace and scarcity and fighting and surviving. I'm not pessimistic, but I am realistic and I'm pragmatic. And we as a human collective are not going to survive if we stay in this limited paradigm of who and what we are. And I know that I know I sound kind of like a broken record over the years because I keep saying there's so much more to reality. There's so much more to what we understand. There's so much more than what these five senses tell us. And where I find it so interesting is that we're at a place in human development and human history that it doesn't have to be an either or. It's not a science or spirit. It's a both and as we go deeper into spirituality, we find more science. And as we go deeper into science, we're connecting with spiritual principles that have been being taught for thousands of years. And so it's fun. And this principle, you know, so many times on Sunday mornings, I tend to, we were in a conversation last week, and somebody asked, what is my favorite principle? And usually I tend towards the inherent worth and dignity of every person. But one of the principles up here is the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And that's so important and so valuable right now. And understanding that there's more than what we understand. You know, we create with sound. I create with this voice box. Joanna creates with this voice box. My words are different than her words, and my tone is different than her tone, but you create beauty and you create change in the sound waves that go through each and every one of our bodies when we're hearing beautiful music. And we create something different when you hear the sound waves of somebody standing up at a pulpit and expressing passionate ideas about who and what we can do and be together. And then that energy that starts as sound, which actually started as an idea and then goes into sound, gets put together in action. And that's science. That's quantum physics. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to try to speak science language, but that's what matters. And we have an idea, and we thought, let's come together of who and what we can be as this faith community, and how do we support the faith community? Well, we do something called an auction where we share our gifts and our values. And that's an idea and a concept. And then every year we come up with how to put that together. Well, this year near Halloween, I have an idea. Let's call it a haunted auction. And I express that through this voice box. And it goes out to all of you. And you hear it on some quantum cosmic level. It becomes a little part of who you are. And then we show up on Friday to cut out ghosts or to put up tables. And then Wendy uses her voice box down there and says, let's bid. And all of a sudden, we've made an idea manifest into a reality that then we go home with physical things in our hands. That's pretty cool. And there's science behind that. There's scientific principles behind that. There is our spiritual principles. The spiritual principle of manifestation is behind that. And they work together. They're not contradicting each other. And over the years, I haven't put it together in a science and spirituality sermon so much, but over the years I've shared with you ideas about Richard Dawkins' map of consciousness, where he, with his scientific tools, and I don't know how, because like I said, I'm not a scientist, but you can understand the science in his book, Power versus Force, but he created a whole map of consciousness where he tested and measured the frequency of different emotions. And literally, you know, when we say, you know, last week, Dolly Parton, you know, saying rise above, well, there's a spiritual principle behind that. There's a scientific principle behind that, because Richard Dawkins has shown that the frequency, the vibration of hate and anger and fear calibrates literally at a much lower level than compassion and joy and love. And so when we say, I need to raise my vibration, it's not just a new age thing, it's an actual spiritual principle, but it's also a scientific principle. And I've given sermons about that, about the map of consciousness. But that's one area if you are interested to learn more. What is that map of consciousness? A few years ago, Bill Hilty won the auction sermon, and he wanted me to do a sermon about frisson. And basically, it's how sound moves through our body, and it's like when you hear this soothing sound, it goes through your body and you get chills and you feel deep relaxation. And that's scientific. And as part of that sermon, we talked about cymatics, and we showed a video where you have this table of sand, and you do different sound waves and different music, and when you put the music next to the table of sand, it literally went into different geometric patterns, because sound waves can express in geometry. That's science, and that's spirituality. And that goes into the concept of Dr. Emoto in Japan, who photographed water molecules, and we've talked about that, how when you send love into these water molecules, they have these beautiful crystalline patterns. And when you send words of anger or fear or hate, they end up in these like little conglomerations of a mess. That's the spiritual principle when you hear about the spiritual concepts of love. Jesus came and he talked about love. And when my son Nathaniel was little, he told me he just wasn't going to come to church anymore because all we talked about was love. And it was so boring. But those were spiritual principles. But that principle of love can literally be quantified and measured through photography of water crystals and geometric patterns. And those are the same patterns that can be developed through different sound waves. So when we're at church on Sunday and Joanna has picked out some amazing music, there's intentionality behind that. There's frequency behind that. There's coherence behind that, and there's science behind that. And yet, we're here, we're receiving it as a spiritual principle when I'm talking about let's raise our vibration, raise who we are so that we can be beings of love in a world that feels dark and scary. And isn't that cool?
Very cool.
And when we look at what's going on in the world, it can be scary and it can be horrible and it can be sad. But I don't want that to be the end of the story, because that I don't think is what humanity is meant to be. Humanity is not the end of the story. We're not at the end of our story. I don't believe that in any capacity. I think we might be nearing the end of an old paradigm of what it means to be human. But that's not the end of the story. And I was thinking about this today, and once again, I'm not really a scientist, and I don't know if I'm going to articulate it as well as whoever I saw on YouTube articulating this, but let's imagine our consciousness, and imagine that there is nothing except just you have a piece of paper and all there is a dot. And you're that little dot. And that's all there is you're a dot. So your little dot self is kind of just hanging out. And then all of a sudden you realize, okay, there's something called a line. And so the dot turns into a line. And then you went from just hanging out to being like, oh, I can go over here. I can go over here. I can go over here. I can go over here, right? Isn't that fun? And you're just like zipping back and forth because that's so much fun, because before you were just this dot. But you can't really imagine anything else because that's all you know. You went from this dot to this line, and that was pretty cool. And then somebody comes along and says, but did you know that you can also go up and down? And then all of a sudden your world has gone from this dot to this line going back and forth to up and down. And now you can go back and forth, you can stay still, and you can go up and down, and you can go up and down anywhere along that line. I mean, wouldn't you feel like your world had just completely expanded? And then, to blow yourself away, somebody's like, you know what? If you like get off of that flat piece of paper, you can actually go back and forth, and you can go up and down, and you can go forward and backwards. What in the world is that? Could you have imagined that before seeing it or being it? It's probably not something that would be in your consciousness, because you don't even know what you don't know, because you don't know that it even doesn't exist until it exists. And then it's like, wow. So now you're moving back and forth, you're moving up and down, you're moving forward and backward, and you've gone from possibly just this flat circle to understanding you might be a whole sphere. There's this whole sphere. But you can't really describe a sphere to somebody who's only on a flat piece of paper as a circle. How would you explain that to somebody? How would you explain that? And so you're going back and forth, you're going up and down. Life is like pretty cool, and then all of a sudden one day somebody bleeps in a whole bunch of color. And now you've gone from black and white to color, and all of these hues, and every color has its own vibration, and you're experiencing color. And then all of a sudden, what more could there be, right? And then somebody starts singing, and you hear sound. And now you're kind of this 3D entity that has color in its life, and has movement in its life, and has sound in its life. And what more could there be? And I think that that's where we are now. If we know now, let's say we know now, if we know now that there was more than just being a point, and then we know now that there's more than just being a line, and we know that there's just more being a vertical axis, why does it stop where we are right now? Why do we think it ends right now? And that's what I think is happening with this connection between science and spirituality. People are waking up and expanding their consciousness outside of just the sphere of what we now know. And some people are having experiences and saying, there's more than we can even imagine right now. And they're having these amazing spiritual experiences that the rest of us are like, wow, I kind of believe that, but that's not happening to me, so that's kind of out there, but wow, maybe? But at the same time, then the scientists, the quantum physicists, are going deeper into what they thought was possible with science. And they're like, well, actually, what this person over here just said about their near-death experience or out-of-body experience or whatever, actually, we're finding some scientific tools that are learning how to calibrate that. So where my hope is for us today as human beings, what the invitation is, I think, for humanity, is that now is the time that we collectively, as a humanity, either get to say, we're going to open our mind to the idea and the concept that there is a lateral and vertical line that we don't even know, or we're going to close it down. We're going to say, nope, 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 that's kind of not safe. That feels completely unfamiliar. That's kind of scary, and we're just going to stay on this line. But we know what happens. We talked about this last week. When we stay on this line, going from here to here and here to here, when we live lives that feel so limited in that type of consciousness, we end up being angry, being hopeless, fighting for resources, and literally killing each other. That doesn't work. That doesn't work anymore. And so I've realized for me, I can't be in a world that's only going back and forth anymore. I have to help create a world that maybe has a more expanded understanding of ultimate reality, even though, like I said, I'm the big picture person. I'm not the scientist that can explain how it works. But I'm coming to a level of understanding that I know that it's there, and I know that it does work, and I know that it's an option for us, because we're not going to, what we need is our consciousness to understand from a sphere-like perspective, but right now we're just on that flat paper that only can comprehend a circle. But if we stay in that flat circle, we're not going to survive. And I don't mean that in a scary way. It's just kind of what it is. It's time. Like, it's time. And we're all needed. Every one of us. So I have my voice, and this beautiful choir has its voice, and there are doctors in this building right now. There are scientists in this building. There are historians in this building. There are professors in this building. There are firefighters in this building. We don't all do it the same way, but we all get to do it and expand who we are, while we're understanding that it's not an either or anymore, it's a both and, but we don't even know where it's taking us. So that's my invitation today, is just to start thinking a little bit differently. Allow yourself to expand your consciousness, expand your realm of possibility, and understand that the science and the spirit are working together, literally as we make music, as we sing. And we're closing today with one of my favorite hymns, Meditation on Breathing. But as we use the sound waves, as we use the breath, as we feel the molecules going in and out of our physical body, I invite you to reflect on the science of it, but I invite you also to bring that science into that spiritual experience as we create together.
Folks, let's stand and sing. I encourage the congregation to sing the top line. We will sing it repeated many, many times. I will let you know when it's the last time.
we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go now in peace. Amen.